You think your chores are tough? Well, today we're going to take a look at what life was really like for kids in colonial America, and I guarantee you it's going to make taking out the trash feel like a vacation. Let's jump right in. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to walk through a typical day for a colonial kid. First up, their work, which, spoiler alert, was non-stop. Then we'll see what was on the menu. After that, we'll dive into how they learned, and finally, figure out how on earth they had any fun without a single screen in sight. Okay, so just for a second, picture your morning. You probably flick on a light, stumble to the kitchen, pour a bowl of cereal from a box, and maybe you're already scrolling on your phone. Sounds about right, doesn't it? All right, hold that thought. Because we are about to hit the rewind button, and things are about to get very, very different. We are going back 300 years. We're talking about the 1700s, landing right in the middle of the 13 English colonies in North America, a completely different world. And when I say a different world, I mean it. Forget about electricity or indoor plumbing. There were no supermarkets to run to, no washing machines. Just think about it. From the second you woke up, every single task, from getting water to lighting a fire just to stay warm, was a major physical effort. Which brings us perfectly to our first section, chores. For colonial kids, work wasn't something you did to earn an allowance. It was all about survival for the whole family, and it always, always came before play. And that labor was split pretty clearly along gender lines. Boys were usually outside with their fathers doing the heavy lifting like chopping firewood, feeding the animals, farming the crops, and even hunting for dinner. Meanwhile, girls were inside with their mothers, and their world revolved around domestic work, spinning thread to knit clothes, churning butter, and get this, even making soap and candles from animal fat. Imagine that. And we are not talking about just taking out the trash here. The source material is really clear about this. By the time a kid was just 7 years old, they were already pulling a serious amount of weight. The whole idea of childhood just being a time for school and play, that really didn't exist for most people back then. Okay, so they worked hard. But what about when they got hungry? Let's talk about food. You know, if the chores sound tough, getting food on the table was a whole other ballgame. You couldn't just open the fridge because there wasn't one. Families had to be almost completely self-sufficient. Basically, if you wanted to eat, you had to grow it, hunt it, or find it yourself. And to keep meat from spoiling without a freezer, you had to preserve it by salting it, smoking it, or drying it out. This was an absolutely critical skill to survive those long, cold winters. Now, if there was one food that was the absolute superstar of the colonial diet, it was corn. Corn was king. It was this incredibly versatile and vital crop that Native Americans actually taught the colonists how to grow, and it became the foundation for pretty much every meal. I mean, just look at the ways they used it. You might wake up and have corn mush for breakfast. Then, with your main meal, you'd have a side of cornbread. And if you were lucky enough to get a sweet treat, it might just be corn pudding. They used it for everything. A lot of the time, the main family meal was a big, hearty stew that just bubbled away in a single pot over the open fireplace all day long. And when it came to making things sweet, sugar was a super rare luxury, so they relied on things like honey or maple syrup. Okay, so they worked hard, they ate what they grew, but did they go to school? Well, the answer is it's kind of complicated. Getting an education wasn't a sure thing for everybody. It really came down to where you lived and how wealthy your family was. You had two pretty different scenarios. Up in New England, towns were often required by law to have a school. So a lot of kids there got to attend these one-room schoolhouses to learn the basics, reading, writing, and some math. But down in the South, farms were massive and spread really far apart, so there just weren't many schools. If you were a kid there, you'd probably only get an education if your family was wealthy enough to hire a private tutor. And get this, since paper and pencils were hard to come by, this was their textbook. It's called a hornbook. It's a wooden paddle with a lesson sheet tacked on, maybe with the alphabet or a prayer. To protect that paper, it was covered with a super thin, see-through layer of actual animal horn. How resourceful is that? They were tough and could be passed down for years. For a lot of boys, formal school didn't last very long anyway. Around age 12 or so, they might become an apprentice. This meant leaving home to go live with a master craftsman, like a blacksmith or a silversmith, to learn a trade for several years. It was basically their version of higher education and job training all rolled into one. So after all that work, all that school,
Did these kids ever get to have any fun? Oh, absolutely. Life was hard, for sure, but kids will always be kids, and they had tons of imagination and energy for playtime.
And what's really fascinating is how many of their games are still around today. They play tag, hide and seek, and hopscotch. A really big one was rolling a large wooden hoop down the road with a stick, trying to see who could keep it going the fastest or the farthest. And of course, their toys weren't from a store. They were all handmade from whatever you could find. Girls would make dolls from corn husks or scraps of fabric. Boys might have spinning tops carved out of wood, marbles they made from clay, or even kites they built from leftover materials. Imagination was everything. And that really brings us to a great point from our source material. It just goes to show that while technology and the world around us changes dramatically, kids are still kids. The day-to-day challenges were totally different, but that core desire to play, to imagine, and to have fun, that is absolutely universal. So, a colonial kid's life was this incredible mix. It was unbelievably hard and full of really demanding work. But it was also a life filled with practical learning, being a vital part of the family team, and finding joy in simple, creative fun. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. If a kid from the 1700s could suddenly see your life today, what one thing, a light switch, a refrigerator, a video game, what do you think would be the thing that would just absolutely astonish them the most?